My name is Emma Bergamini, and I wanted to share with you guys today just a little bit of my story and how I got to where I am today. I grew up in what seemed to be a Christian household. I went to church most Sundays, even went to private Christian school. And growing up, as I think a lot of people understand if you've grown up in a church setting, a lot of times I felt like people really focused on like the rules God had set out for us, and a lot of times just heard all the bad things that could happen to us if we don't follow those rules. And it just didn't sit well with me, but like I said, I grew up in it, and I think for that reason, a lot of people are scared to show who they really are in the church because they're scared of what people will think of them if people know that they're not following those rules. That was definitely what my family did. Like I said before, we looked like your average Christian family, but what a lot of people didn't know is that underneath the surface, we were definitely far from perfect. The adults in my life really struggled with a lot of substance abuse, which in turn led to what most would consider a pretty traumatic childhood for me, and I did experience a lot of different types of abuse in that childhood as well. Like I said, they said they were Christian, and so I assumed that that was what all Christians were like, that we all pretended we were one way, but in reality we were another way. I grew up in that childhood for about 14 years before I finally realized that what was going on wasn't okay, and I decided that it was better for me to be out on my own than it was to be living in my parents' care. So at 14, I moved out, and I just started couch surfing with different friends, being with different families and stuff. Pretty soon after, I began to realize how nice it was not having parents who were asking me where I was or what I was doing or what time I was going to be home. I realized how easy it was to get away with a lot more than other kids did because I didn't have the accountability of parents. So I started going to parties about my 8th grade year. It started off just as your regular, a couple Friday nights, whatever, just go out, have fun with your friends. But it turns out I really like drinking, and so I made my own life a party so that I could party every day and not have to wait till Friday. I started drinking and smoking weed pretty much every day, and then before I knew it, it had spiraled pretty fast, which it does a lot of the times, and I was pretty much finding whatever I could to get high because the reality of what my life was way too much for me to handle. About 6 months into that of my party days, as I call it, I was invited to a friend to go to Heights Church, and I was like, heck no, I do not want to be a part of a church. But she was like, hey, we got ChickFilA, and I was like, okay, if there's ChickFilA, like maybe that's where I need to be. So I went just for ChickFilA, that was it. I didn't even stay for the message, I just went for the ChickFilA. And then sure enough, week after week, I kept coming back for the ChickFilA or whatever other food they were having. And like I said, I didn't really stay for the messages, but that seed was definitely planted in my heart just by people inviting me to get ChickFilA. So again, fast forward about a year into my party days, my aunt and uncle at the time found out that I hadn't been living at home and really felt like God had laid on their heart just that they needed to take me into their home. And that was, I'm sure, really scary for them because they kind of knew what they were getting themselves into, bringing in, at that time, a 15-year-old who was pretty heavily addicted on pills and a bunch of different types of drugs. Moving into their house, they only had 2 rules for me, and that were that I had to be sober and that I had to go to church with them as a family once a week. And I thought, heck to the no, I'm not staying here. I decided right then and there in that conversation that I was going to get myself kicked out because I like to do my own thing and I don't like to have rules. So about 3 weeks after I moved in with them, I went to a party and made a lot of decisions that I now regret. They ended up being posted all over the place, and pretty much all of Prescott heard about my crazy party. And I thought for sure leaving that party that I was going to be kicked out, and I was confident in it. So then my aunt, sure enough, got a call the next day, or a few calls by parents in the area saying, did you hear what your niece did? And I was like, yep, she's going to be so angry, she's going to kick me out. Well, when I thought she was going to meet me with anger, she actually came and met me with a lot of grace and love instead. And when I thought I was going to be kicked out, she sat down with me and acknowledged my hurt and said to me that she was disappointed in the decisions I had made, but nothing I could do would ever change the amount of love she has for me. And that was the first time really ever that I had been shown or given a glimpse of what Jesus' love for us is like. And so I was like, I don't know, maybe. But that seed that had been planted when I ate the ChickFilA had now been watered just a little bit by her coming down to my level and being with me. Fast forward about 2 years, and I now am adopted by my aunt and uncle, and I have 6 crazy siblings who I love so, so much. And I know that it was God's plan all along for me to be with my family. It was far from a fairy tale ending, but every single time that I made the mistakes and as I struggled to come out of those habits, I was still met with love and grace from my aunt, which is similar to the way that Jesus does with us. He's not angry at us. He comes and meets us with love and grace because that's who he is. I still struggled a lot to get clean of my old habits. Yet every single time I made a mistake, I was met with love and grace and a reminder that nothing I could ever do would change the fact that I am part of my family. I've also really struggled with my mental health, even coming out of it. I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression, as well as disordered eating, and then PTSD as I try to crawl my way back from the things that had happened to me when I was younger. I think a lot of times I've heard people say, oh, you don't know what real problems are, you just wait till you get in the real world. But I do think that I know what real problems are, and I think a lot of this generation does. I know what it's like to wake up in the morning and wonder why you're still here, and I know what it's like to go throughout your day trying to find any reason you can to stay here and any piece of happiness you can hold on to. And I also know what it feels like when those reasons to stay and the happiness you have has completely run out. Through coming to Christ, though, I also know joy, and I know that happiness is temporary and it's of this world, but joy that comes from the Lord is something that is energizing and life-giving, and it's not something that fades away, but something that is continuous. Like I said, the anxiety part of it, I know what it's like to go around with the knots in your stomach when you have to go to school, and the feeling that your heart's going to beat out of your chest when all you have to do is have a conversation with someone. But through coming to Christ, I also know peace and know that anything that happens in today's world won't go with me to heaven, and I know that I'm never alone in what I'm walking through, and that Jesus has a plan for every single step I take. And so I don't need to worry about where I'm going. I also know what it's like to have no one, no friends, no family, completely alone. I know what that's like. And I also know, coming to Christ, that I have a best friend and a Father in heaven, so that I'm never alone. And I've also gained a church community who loves me with the real type of love, not the fake or toxic one sometimes we can see in broken people. But I can see real love because they know who Jesus is and they know what his love looks like. I know what it feels like to be full of shame and feel worthless, and I know what it feels like to be stuck in what seems to be a never-ending cycle of sin, but I also know through coming to Jesus what it's like to walk free of all of those things as well. I know that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made in his image, and that nothing I could ever say or do would change that. I've lost everything. There was a time in my life where I quite literally had nothing. I had 2 outfits I would switch between. I had no family, no friends, no car. I had nothing. And I was in the middle of what seemed like an impossible situation when Jesus scooped down his hand, picked me up, and placed me in the hand of my family. Jesus turned my impossible situation into a redemption, and I believe that he can do the same for you if only you make the room in your heart for him to do so. If you're sitting here today and you've been hurt by the broken people in the church, I'm here to remind you that those people do not represent Jesus, and they represent their own hurt and brokenness inside of their lives. I would encourage you to not let those people define your relationship with Jesus, because He wants to give you a peace, love, and grace that you'd never experience otherwise. God is so much more than His rules. He has the power to take even the darkest of circumstances and turn them into good. I don't know where my life would be today without my faith, but I can assure you that I would not be here sharing my story with you, and honestly, I don't even know if I would be alive. If you hear one thing from my testimony today, I want you to know that you're seen, you're loved, and you are valued, and nothing you could do could separate you from the love that Jesus wants to give you.